I remember getting a phone call. It couldn't have been any earlier than 3:30 in the morning. My eyes rolled repeatedly as I struggled to wake up. The phone was loud, and it was safe to say I was more than annoyed. Any grogginess that still filled my body left when I saw the caller ID. "Hello, Father Henry. It's in the middle of the night, is everything all right?" I tried to sound as enthusiastic as possible. It was silent for a few seconds. "No, it's not all right. I'm quite disturbed if I am being honest. It's urgent. Please meet me at the church as soon as possible." His voice was sharp and actually kind of frightening. I jumped out of bed and quickly put on clothes. I was rushing so fast, I didn't even care if I had left anything behind. Before I knew it, I was already at the church. I could feel my hands were sweating as I turned the key to switch off my ignition. Staring at the church that I've been an ordained exorcist at for over 20 years, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I reached for the church doors. As soon as I saw Father Henry, I was surprised to see him sitting in the very back. He didn't even acknowledge that I had come in. It was only when I sat next to him that he began to talk. He was still looking straight forward though, never making eye contact. This was extremely unlike him in every way. Even when I had performed dozens of exorcisms before, he was never this distant when he told me my next mission. I had already assumed that this is what he was about to tell me about, a new mission. "I am sorry to disturb you in such early hours, but I just could not wait any longer. You see, there is this woman. She's only 18 years old. Her mother came to me last month pleading for my help. After the symptoms she had explained to me, I decided to go and check it out for myself first. You know, to make sure she wasn't fabricating for attention. Well, let me tell you, Father, in my opinion, that young woman has something evil inside of her. So dark that not even her soul can shine through." I saw 4 seconds of lucidity. This is the most dangerous case I have ever come across. Please, Father Matthew, will you least assess her? His voice was pleadingly desperate. Something I had never heard before from him. At that point, could I have said no? This was my job after all. I agreed, and he handed me a piece of paper with the address of the house that needed the assessment. He told me they would be expecting me to be there by 10 in the morning. Great. A whole 6 hours of sleep should be enough rest for something like this. I rolled my eyes at the though. When I got home and finally lied back down, all I think about what this case. Those 6 hours of sleep turned into 2. I was exhausted, but 3 cups of coffee gave me the energy to push on. I guess. I will not lie to you, I was anxious. Before I even approached the house, I was inclined to just turn around and go home. I knew I couldn't though. This was my job after all. For those who believe, I'd like to think I was saving lives. I took a deep breath and made my way to the front door. Before I could even reach the porch, the door swung open. I stood there for a moment waiting for someone to come and greet me. No one did. I walked to open door and poked my head in. "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice was shaky. I didn't get a response, but I heard shuffling and screaming from the upstairs. I knew better than to come into someone's home uninvited, but the scream was so blood-curdling that I couldn't help myself. I made my way into the house and immediately ran upstairs. I followed the sound, and outside of a locked door I heard a man and a woman. They were not fighting though, it seemed like he was trying to help. I knocked. "Hello. I was sent by the church, and I'm here to assess a young woman. I obviously said it loud enough to hear, because even though all of the screaming still hadn't stopped, an older man unlocked the door and slammed it shut as he walked out. He locked the door behind him with 4 deadbolts. He stared at me for a few moments, and then instructed me to follow him to the kitchen table. The old man pulled a seat out for me, then proceeded to sit right across from where I was. He had a folder with him. He put it on the table, and slowly slid it over to me. Hesitant, I took the folder without any words ever being spoken. I opened it up and started to flip through the pages. The few first papers were doctors she had seen over the last year. Not a single one could find a proper diagnosis. When I flipped through all of the medical papers, there started to be pictures. When I flipped to the first picture, the old man finally spoke. "My daughter, well, I don't know anymore. We're a very religious family. Before my wife and I separated, she couldn't accept the fact our daughter might be in trouble. She took her to meaningless doctors that told us nothing. I knew in my heart what this was, and she did as well. She just couldn't accept it. These pictures are from the very beginning when this all started happening." You could hear the heartbreak in his voice. I nodded. He could tell my demeanor was empathetic. He shook his head and pointed at the folder. I focused my attention back on the pictures. Doing this for so long, seeing a hurt family never got any better emotionally. The screaming had subsided by this point, but I could still hear whispers coming from the upstairs bedroom. The first picture seemed normal. A happy, young, and thriving woman. The next picture was of the same young woman, but with noticeable bags under her eyes. The third and fourth pictures were here lying down, with a vomit bucket beside here. Each picture she got sicker and more pale. It wasn't until the 10th picture that I started to clench my teeth. This young, healthy, once thriving woman was covered in slash wounds. There were carvings of satanic symbols and Latin scripture. Her teeth took on a yellowish-green color, and they were razor sharp. The final picture was of her on the ceiling on all fours, head turning an entire 360 degrees. I shut the folder. "Sir, do you mind if I meet your daughter? I do believe she may need our help. I must examine her first thoroughly, if that's all right with you." I tried to sound as professional as possible. He nodded and led me back upstairs to the deadbolt locked door. As soon as I walked through the door, I could hear her back and neck bones cracking when she noticed me. Her eyes were staring directly through me. I felt a shiver run down my spine as remembered her once blue eyes had turned to pitch black. "Where Father Henry? You didn't want to bring him along? What are you going to do without your backbone, Father Matthew?" Her voice was deep, something that should never be able to produced from a woman. Even a man couldn't have that voice. It was raspy, demanding. It made my blood run cold. Her skin was starting to turn yellow. She spit on me when I tried to approach her. It was bloody. She started speaking in tongues, and before I knew it she was ripping clumps of her hair out from the scalp. The clumps of hair were bloody at the ends. Her feet were chained, but her hand weren't. I asked her father to hold her hands down so I could examine her eyes. She looked me directly in the eyes. As I was examining them, I saw it. Her right pupil extended and momentarily made her entire eye black. There was no white at all. I backed up instinctively. I ran down the stairs and called Father Henry. I explained to him that I have assessed the girl is possessed and the exorcism need to happen immediately. He approved the exorcism, and I grabbed my kid from the trunk of my car. "Tie her to the bed now," I screamed as I entered her room once more. Her father has bound her hands together and I began reciting. Everything was going as it usually would have, but the holy water was leaving third-degree burns. I had never seen such a thing in my entire life. At least not to that degree. She was speaking so fast I couldn't understand, and I speak fluent Latin. I just kept going until she had broken her restraints. Before anyone could grab her, she was gone. We searched for days, until she showed back up on her own. She seemed okay. Her color was back, her teeth were normal, and her voice sounded normal. I was in shock. Her father called me over to thank me for saving his daughter, but I knew deep down I didn't. There was something else going on. I could feel it. That night as I was getting ready for bed, I was brushing my teeth when I heard tapping from within the walls. I figured it was probably rats, and I would call an exterminator to take care of the problem within the next few days. No big problem, I thought. Happens to a lot of people. Oh well. The following week, I started losing clumps of hair. My teeth were starting to decay. I was having terrible thoughts that I just couldn't shake. I started developing wounds that resembled that of satanic nature. By the end of the week I stayed curled up at home, bald and bleeding my eyes and ears. I finally decided to look into the mirror, and watched my pupil form into my entire eye, giving it a blackening shape. I decided to resign. Doing this for 20 years, I knew what this was. I didn't exorcise a demon, I freed it. I have never encountered this particular demon. It feeds off fear and religion. Once it finds a host who has had a lot of trauma, or emptiness inside, it will ravage your body until your physical being dies. Unsurprisingly, the woman I performed an exorcism on had died shortly after returned home. I thought about contacting Father Henry, but I didn't want him to get tangled up in this mess. Half of time I black out and wake up in pools of blood. My fingernails are peeling off. I have an urge to scratch into the walls. Last night I even talked to something. It told me to tear my eyeballs out. It's so convincing. Maybe I might. I feel I'm losing my sanity and my health is deteriorating. This is the end for me, but I know it's not the end of whatever is inside of me. It will grow stronger. There's always going to be people to feed off of. It grows stronger in the darkness. It grows stronger feeling off of your pathetic loneliness. It will tear you from the inside out, feeding on your intestines and vomiting them back inside the gaping wood. Pathetic, pathetic, pathetic. I'm writing this because I know I will die. I know this is the end for me. There's nothing I can do now, other than warn you. Don't think about it, research anything about it, or let it reside in your brain. Don't give it a way in. Don't let it know you know it exists. Don't end up like you. Pathetic. Me.